Good afternoon, friends. It's my proud privilege to welcome His Excellency Mr. Sardar Rastambayev, Ambassador of Uzbekistan to India, Ambassador Tayal, Ambassador Gitesh Sharma, Ambassador Ashok Sharma, Pandeji, uh, Professor Upadhyay, uh, Archana Upadhyay ji, Dr. Rajkumar ji, and Professor Divedi. Thank you for all making it to this place for the round table on the parliamentary elections in Uzbekistan, which was held on October 27th, 2024. The, the elections were held to the legislative chamber of the Oli Majlis, that is the national parliament of the Republic of Uzbekistan, and the local councils of people's deputies. The system of election is a mixed electoral system combining majoritarian and proportional systems, which has been held first time in the history of this country. Around 850 foreign and international observers monitored the elections across the country, and we have some of those here who were there as international observers to those elections. Around 5 political parties participated in these elections. These were Liberal Democratic Party of Uzbekistan, Democratic Party of Uzbekistan, Ecological Party of Uzbekistan, People's Democratic Party of Uzbekistan, and Social Democratic Party of Uzbekistan. We look forward to the perspectives from experts who were there on the ground, former ambassadors who have worked in Uzbekistan, the academicians, and of course, His Excellency, the Ambassador of Uzbekistan to India. I forward my mic to Mr. Professor Divedi for further deliverance on this matter.
Thank you, Professor Agrawal, Vice President, MERI, Group of Institutions. Without wasting much time, let me give the floor to His Excellency Sardar Rustambayev, Ambassador of Uzbekistan to India, to share his perspective and opening remarks to today's roundtable. Excellency Rustambayev.
Good afternoon, friends, dear colleagues, excellencies. It's a great honor and privilege to welcome you all here, and I would like to say a special word of thanks to our colleagues, to our esteemed host for hosting us here today and devoting this mini round table, I would say, where we comfortably sit and discuss a very important subject and topic for Uzbekistan's political life. Today we will be seeking your guidance, seeking your feedback on the election process, which was on the elections which were held in Uzbekistan. As Honorable Professor Ali Agrawal just has mentioned, on 27 October we had large parliamentary elections, and according to our new constitution, revised constitution, we have held it in absolutely new political atmosphere. So I'll give you some basic figures and facts, and then to summarize, and probably then you can reflect on some of the specific subjects and issues of these elections. So as you know, these elections, they took part in a completely new social political environment as stipulated by our new constitution. For the first time in our history, the legislative chamber of Oli Majlis was elected during a mixed electoral system, as you have noticed, combining majority and proportional systems, when 75 deputies were elected directly through the majority system, and virtually voters can cast their votes on specific candidates, while the remaining 75 were elected based on the votes given to the political party. So it's a system which differentiates these elections from the previous ones. Another noteworthy aspect is almost full digitalization of the process. So we introduced new technologies to monitor the process, introduction of new technologies that will help to make them more transparent and more. I think it's better now. So, new system is introducing new technological innovations to the political process, and as you have already witnessed, they were quite widely introduced in Uzbekistan. Then a new system for election bodies led by the Central Election Committee was introduced, while political parties were required to ensure at least 40% of their candidates for deputy positions are women. So gender equality is also being ensured, and I think it's a very important issue, and Uzbekistan can take pride in that. We are at the forefront of political processes. Not every country of the world can ensure that gender equality at such a level. Of course, the election took place in given the strengthened parliamentarism and the powers representative bodies at the local level, as established by the renewed constitution. In particular, the absolute powers of the legislative chamber have increased from 5 to 12. And for those of you who served in Uzbekistan, they know that we are gradually coming to the we're developing our parliamentarism in Uzbekistan. Previously, there were not so much powers in our legislative chamber and higher chamber. So now, step by step, we are increasing those powers. So now, their number have increased from 5 to 12, and those of Senate from 12 to 18. The institution of hakims, governors, leading local councils of people, deputies, was also abolished. And 33 powers previously held by hakims have been delegated to the local councils, which is also a very important step in the democratization of the process. As far as the elections are concerned, more than 850 foreign experts, specialists, including, of course, Indian observers. We are very much honored to host such distinguished delegations, have had an opportunity to observe the election process. Except for political observers, we of course had some Indian media, which was also widely covering this subject, and we had many important articles afterwards in the Indian newspapers depicting how Uzbekistan is changing, how important role these parliamentary elections are playing in our political life. And of course, the delegation was headed by the Chief Election Commissioner of India, which also shows the importance of our bilateral relations, of our strategic relations, and I think it was a very big symbol to all of us. Altogether, about 15,030,000 citizens voted in the election, and this was almost 75% of the total number of voters. The party affiliation of a total of 150 deputies elected to the Legislative Chamber of Olij Majlis, based on the votes given to the candidates, were as follows. As you mentioned, the Liberal Democratic Party won 64 seats, or 42%. Milli Tiklanish, or National Reviver Democratic Party, 29 seats, or 19%. Adolat, which means justice, Social Democratic Party, 21 seats, or 14%. The People's Democratic Party, 20 seats, or 13%. And of course, very important, Environmental Ecological Party, 16 seats, or 10%. And as you know, according to our constitution and to our legislation, special number of quota is given always to the Ecological Party, so that environmental issues are always on the top of our agenda. So, according to the results of parliamentary elections, the composition of the lower house of national parliament was renewed by almost 60%. 38% of the elected deputies are women, which is the highest figure in our history. And I believe you would also find following information interesting. All of the deputies, they have higher education. 15% of them studied in foreign countries. 30% of them are economists. 22% of them are lawyers. 18.7% are pedagogues, teachers. 12% engineers, and 9.3% are the Medicare people, while 8% represent culture, entrepreneurs, and farmers. So I just wanted to put it in a nutshell, but I think your remarks and inputs will be much more valuable. I can talk for hours about this subject, but I think for us it will be the purpose of today's meeting is to hear from you, your evaluation, your observations. To this will be very important for us to further improve and make maybe some small adjustments to our legislation. If we have some shortcomings, if we have some deficiencies that you have observed, we would be happy also to hear them, so that we can adapt in the future endeavors to make our country more democratic, more transparent. And India has, I would say, long history of parliamentarism, the biggest democracy in the world, and we are very lucky to observe all these processes which are happening here. And this year we also have witnessed probably one of the largest democratic elections in the world. And your experience, of course, very much valuable to us. And probably I would like to give a floor to our colleagues so that they can share their kind remarks, their valuable remarks. And I'm sure that today's conference will benefit further for our bilateral relations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Excellency. Very important point that this election is very important as far as empowering the legislative bodies of Republic of Uzbekistan. Very important point made. And before I invite Ambassador Ashok Sharma, President of India Central Asia Foundation, may I mention that the Chief Election Commissioner of India has visited Uzbekistan as the international observer. Ambassador Ashok Kumar Sharma, who has served in Uzbekistan, who has spent substantial amount of time in former Soviet space. Currently, he is heading India Central Asia Foundation. So I request Ambassador Ashok Kumar Sharma to share his perspectives on democratic processes in Uzbekistan.
Your Excellency, the Ambassador of the Republic of Uzbekistan to India, Mr. Rustambayev, Dr. Lalit Agarwal, Vice President of MERI Group of Institutions, my former boss, Mr. S.R. Tayal, and my colleague, Mr. Gitesh Sarmaji, and distinguished scholars from JNU and NetStrat. The times have changed since our college and university days. Our debates used to be about the importance of democracy, and the topic used to be whether democracy is the best form of government. Now that debate is over throughout the world. Now if there is a debate, it is only about what kind of democracy is suitable to us, or which form of democracy a particular country should adopt. In 1980s, many of those countries who were part of a particular bloc during the Cold War era became independent, and all of them chose democracy as their next form of government. Uzbekistan was one of them. Uzbekistan, because of the historical reasons and regional issues or regional requirements, and being a part of a big empire called Soviet Union, had to choose its own path, which was in its best interest, and that is how they chose the presidential form of government. Last year, we had elections for the office of the president. I had the opportunity to witness those elections. Now, after almost 1 year, this year we had parliamentary elections. Now, our younger students would like to know, if they are watching online.
They are.
Good. As to why parliament then? Most of the executive powers are already exercised by the president. So why do we have parliamentary elections? Now, this is to give representation to all sections of society and also to all sections of the population. That parliaments are necessary even in presidential form of government. Even in the United States of America, in France and other countries, wherever you have presidential form of government, you do have parliament. It plays a major role. Not many people realize that if there is no parliament, many sections of the society or many regions and minorities will have no representation. As Honorable Ambassador has already pointed out, gender equality. Now you cannot have two presidents, one man and one woman. Now parliament is also one of the forums where you can provide proper representation to women and men both, of course. I mean, there could be women also who are president. So for gender equality, for the rights of minorities, for the rights of smaller regions. There may be different kind of regions in the country, like for example, in India, if we don't have a parliament, if we have only a presidential form of government and very weak parliament, then states like Goa, Mizoram, Nagaland, Arunachal will have no representation at all. So these smaller regions, smaller communities, minorities, whether they are linguistic or religious or whatever, they also need representation, and parliament fulfills that requirement. So this is the background that, as Excellency pointed out, Oli Majlis has been given more powers. In fact, their jurisdiction has been expanded not only at federal level or at national level, but also at regional level. And the local councils, regional councils, also have been given more powers. Not only legislative powers, but also to overlook the or say debate the executive's actions and provide solutions and also give constructive suggestions. This is a big change. Now, as far as the introduction of new technologies is concerned, in India, our EVM system, electronic voting machine system, has been in practice for last almost 20 years. Unfortunately, there have been allegations and apprehensions about some sort of electronic rigging. Of course, no proofs have been provided so far, or it is still under discussion and there is a lot of debate going on. But it is also true that we cannot go back. Technology has to stay and we have to adopt better technologies so that there are no apprehensions in future, but we cannot do away with modern technologies as far as our voting system is concerned, and I am happy to note that Uzbekistan is also moving forward in the adoption of new technologies. Now, as far as the executive system in Uzbekistan is concerned, its ministers, its cabinet, president, and Oli Majlis, all these have a joint responsibility, and they work in, I should say, synchronization with each other. In fact, there is no conflict. I was there long ago, almost 25 years ago, but now I found that they work in tandem with each other, and if there are some limitations at some level, they are debated, and I go through the news items, whatever is available on the internet, and I find that most of the discussions in the Oli Majlis are very constructive, and many of these discussions are also looked into, and they are followed by the executive as well. Now, as far as the latest developments in Uzbekistan are concerned, in last 3 years, we have seen big changes in Uzbekistan. Economically, as well as on social indexes, Uzbekistan has been improving its ranking every year. Despite the setback during the COVID period, we have seen that the economy has bounced back. They are one of the fastest growing economies in the region, as well as their education system, their health system, public health system, their social welfare system has improved a lot. Continuously it has improved. Of course, it is no more a communist country, but at the same time, the social welfare or the concept of welfare state still continues. And that is something that other countries should also learn. Despite their economic problems, despite their transition period, during transition period in 1990s, I could see the difficulties Uzbekistan had to face, but still, they never compromised on the welfare state's concept, like free education, free medical, and heavily subsidized housing, heavily subsidized energy, whether it was gas or electricity, and heavily subsidized public transport. Now, this is a model which other developing countries should also follow, that whatever be your economic condition, the welfare of public or the concept of a welfare state should not be compromised. So once again, I congratulate His Excellency for the successful elections his country conducted and set a new example by reserving 40% seats for women. And I also hope that we will also be able to do it very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Sharma. There are various aspects related to the democratic processes in Uzbekistan, the role of institutions, the role of mahalla, role of women, etc. We shall be talking about it post-presentation by our distinguished panelist. Now, may I request Professor Sanjay Kumar Pandey, former chairperson, Center for Central and Russian Studies, Center for Central Asian and Russian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, who has been a keen watcher of political developments, not only in Uzbekistan, but whole former Soviet Union. And he was one of the international observers in Uzbekistan. So may I request now him to share his perspective on this important issue of roundtable, that is democratic processes in Uzbekistan.
Thank you very much, Professor Dwivedi. Thank you, Professor Agrawal. I am privileged to be in the company of the Ambassador of Uzbekistan, Mr. Rustambayev, and also in the company of many of our luminaries whom I have known for a very long period as practitioners and diplomats. I have watched elections in Uzbekistan for the last nearly 2 decades, and this is perhaps the 6th time I went there as an observer. But before I speak about Uzbekistan, I would like to say something about elections, about democracy. Modern democracies are representative democracies in the sense, unlike ancient Greece or ancient Indian republics, these are not direct democracies where people directly participate in the governance of the country. Rather, they choose their representatives, and through representatives, they participate in elections. Also, they hold representatives accountable to them. And one of the writers, foremost writers on electoral democracy was Schumpeter. And according to Schumpeter, free and fair elections, competitive elections at regular intervals are the essential component of electoral democracy. Elections are a mechanism through which people participate. Elections are a mechanism through which people keep a tab on those whom they have elected, hold them accountable. Elections are also a mechanism through which the rulers, the political establishment gets legitimacy, the right to rule, because they have been elected by the people, by the citizens whom they represent. Elections also serve a very important purpose in socializing people in politics. Elections provide political education to people, make them aware of their rights, their responsibilities, as well as the responsibilities of the government. Of course, democracy is not just elections. Democracy also means constitutional government, limited government, separation of powers between executive, legislature, and judiciary, checks and balances, rule of law, and fundamental rights. So, in that sense, parliamentary elections or legislative elections play a very important role, because the legislature is a body which represents various shades of opinion, as Ambassador Sharma very rightly said. And legislature is also a body in which the various policies and programs are deliberated and debated upon, and then decisions are made or taken. And then, of course, public opinion is very important, and elections are one mechanism through which the public opinion is reflected. Elections can be of various types. The ambassador of Uzbekistan talked about the various forms of majoritarian or plural voting elections. There are also proportional representation. Proportional representation, in fact, can be of various types. We Indians are familiar with single transferable vote system. For example, in the election for the President of India or for the members of Rajya Sabha, we use the single transferable vote system, but it's a very complex method in which the electors are supposed to give preferences, first preference, second preference, and third preference. And then first the first preference votes are counted. Then if no candidate gets 50% plus votes in the first preference, then the second preference votes are counted. It's a very complex system. And therefore, in popular elections, many a times, single transferable vote system is not adopted. There are other ways of proportional representation. One is multi-member constituencies. where more than one member is elected from each constituency, and therefore not just the member, not just the person who gets the highest number of votes, but also the second or maybe up to five. It differs from country to country. People are elected, so constituencies are larger, and therefore various constituencies or various shades of opinion can be represented. Yet another form of proportional representation is the list system, in which you don't have territorial constituencies, you rather have party list. In the multi-member constituencies, electors elect individuals or candidates. In the party system, the citizens vote for political parties, and based on the proportion of votes that each political party gets, they are allocated seats in the legislature. Of course, there is a cutoff. Various countries have different cutoff, 5%, 7%, 10%. So this is a more acceptable form of representation, the list system. The problem with the list system is that the various members who are elected do not represent definitive constituencies. The people cannot identify that this person has been elected by me and can approach them. That is not possible in a list system. Therefore, many countries adopted a mixed system in which certain number of seats are on the basis of territorial constituencies and a certain number of seats are elected on the basis of proportional representation. The territorial seats are normally elected on the basis of first past the post system or majority voting system. Many countries have adopted this mixed system. It has been there for a long time. For example, in France, in more recent times, among the post-Soviet states, Russia adopted a mixed system. And similarly, some of the Central Asian countries, in fact, I can name Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan, have adopted proportional as well as territorial representation, forms of representation. Turkmenistan is an exception to this rule. So this step, which the Republic of Uzbekistan has taken, only shows the maturity that the political system has achieved. Normally, the more advanced or more mature political systems adopt mixed voting. So, Uzbekistan has adopted this model, and this was the first election. I have watched previous elections, many of them. I always found that the voting was organized in a very methodical manner, in a very smooth manner. There were special arrangements made for people who had some ailments. So there were people from the health department in each of the election booths. Some of the good points of Uzbekistan's electoral system, the ambassador has already pointed out. For example, the representation of women. They started with 1/3 representation. Now they have gone up to 40%. Similarly, 15 years back or even longer, there was an ecological movement. That ecological movement has now matured into into a party. So that shows that Uzbekistan and the political system of Uzbekistan is very sensitive to the concerns of environment and climate change. So it was a great opportunity to witness this election. I have watched many other elections, and I congratulate the people and the government of Uzbekistan for holding this exercise in a very methodical, smooth, and peaceful manner.